Welcome to the New Process Podcast. Learn all the tools, methods, and best practices combined with people, emotions, and a human-centric mindset to rethink your process and push it to the next level. And here is your host, Mirko Kloppenberg.
Yeah, welcome to episode 30 of the New Process Podcast. Today I'd love to give you a comprehensive summary after 1 year of New Process Podcast. So more or less the state of new process. That's the title of today's episode. And yeah, a lot of things have happened throughout the last year since I started the New Process Podcast. But before we go into the details, a lot of people joined the New Process community throughout the last year. And I'd like to give you a brief introduction of myself first. So as you know, I'm Mirko Kloppenberg. I'm the host of this show. I'm 42 years old. I'm living in Hamburg together with my wife and our 2 daughters. I studied business information systems and I'm also holding an MBA. I've been working for the Lufthansa Group for more than 20 years in various process excellence positions. And I finally started newprocesslab.com as a platform to share know-how and to rethink processes. So what's in for you? You'll learn about the principles, the underlying principles of the new process approach on how to rethink processes. We'll talk a lot about the core elements of the human-centric BPM framework, like the new process lifecycle, the role concept, all the different phases and how to do it, and how to implement this approach in a sustainable way. And I'd like to share a lot of ideas with you on how to inspire people for processes. So how to get people excited about processes based on gamification, community building, content creation, and so on.
And now, let's start to rethink processes.
Yeah, beginning of this year, I asked more than 100 process managers on LinkedIn, are you happy with your employees' acceptance of processes? And not really surprisingly, about 87% said it could be better. I'm not happy with the acceptance of processes by my employees. And even 13% that I'm not at all happy with the acceptance. So that's super sad, because we are fighting for processes a lot out there and we do our best to get people excited and people aren't. It's really hard that you are not happy. Most of you are not happy with employees' acceptance of processes. And this is what I would like to change. And therefore, I researched a bit and tried to find out the reasons why people do not like processes. And there are various, like complexity. So when processes are too difficult to understand, this already starts with the application you're using to provide processes to the employees. If navigation is really hard and the people don't find the processes they would like to retrieve, then it's just not exciting. And it's not surprising that the people don't like processes. And then a notation is used, which is not easy to understand, it's even harder. And you might know that I'm not a big fan of BPMN 2.0 because of the complexity of the full-blown notation. So even if you simplify the notation to just the minimum, it's often still confusing for the employees. So complexity is one problem. Then another reason why people do not like processes is the lack of flexibility. So when they have to work according to processes which do not provide space for individualization, for individual decisions, then people may not like your processes. Inefficiencies is another reason. If processes contain unnecessary steps, for example, which do not make sense, then people may not really like your processes. Or lack of transparency. That's also a big issue. If processes are published without transparent communication, there is no transparency regarding the decisions, why specific changes have been implemented and so on. Or lack of training. That's another reason. If the employees are not trained in a proper way and they do not know how to execute the process and do not know the why and so on. Or lack of involvement, also something which perfectly fits to the new process approach, to involve the people. So if the people are not involved into process design, this will automatically lead to the fact that they dislike processes, or specifically this process. Or lack of trust as another reason. So if people are controlled instead of trusted, that's why they will hate processes. And so this is something we definitely have to change. And that's why I think it's absolutely time to rethink process and focus on the people now. And therefore, what I'm pushing forward is the new process approach. So new process combines new work aspects on the one hand side with BPM tools, methods on the other side to rethink processes. So what do I have in mind when I talk about new work approach, new work methods, and so on? It's a lot about human centricity. So topics like purpose, trust, transparency, diversity. These are all parts of new work. Experience design, like community building, gamification, that's also part of new work, as well as community building, how to build your process community, talking about podcasting, videos, whatever you need to inspire your community. So these are all aspects coming from a new work world. And now with new process, we're going to combine these with process management tools and methods, like having a holistic transformation approach, coming from the strategy to down to execution. Talking about BPM governance, like process management roles, having a process owner established, having process architects, and so on. And finally, it's a lot about visualizing, having a common picture, so modeling processes. It's also a little bit about the higher maturity levels, like using process mining and automation. That's also for sure part of process management. And that's why it's also part of new process. So, but before we talk about new process, just a brief disclaimer, it's not new process versus old process, because we definitely need all these mature methods we know from the past, and then just add human centricity to these and try to get to the next level with your processes by focusing on the people. So to do this, core of the new process approach are the new process principles. At the moment, there are 8 in total, which we've developed with the new process community. And I would like to give you a brief overview and don't go too detailed into the principles, just to give you an idea. So the first principle is to inspire people for excellent processes. This is especially a principle for all of us out there providing process management to an organization. So we, as the ones providing it, have to fight for excellent processes. We have to act as role models to inspire people for processes. So whatever we ask process owners of business processes out there to do for their business processes, we also have to do for our own process, the process of process management. That's the first. Second principle is to trust the people working in and on the process. And I'll provide an example later on how to do this, because right now, often people are not trusted by processes. So that's something we definitely have to change. And the third principle is to involve the people working in the process into the work on the process. So make sure that the people can bring in their ideas, that they are involved into the development of the process design and so on. Then the fourth principle is to foster the development of the people working in the process. So it's not just like you publish a new process design at the end of the development and then, maybe there's an email going out and hopefully the people will work according to the new process. No, that's not the way it works. So already in process design, you have to think about measures on how to develop the people, how to train them, how to enable them to execute the process later on. So foster the development of the people. Then the fifth principle is to design cooperation in and on the process to meet people's needs. That's more or less a secret weapon there to think about how the people cooperate working in the process. And I'll provide an example later on onto that principle as well. Then another principle is to encourage diversity and inclusion through processes. So there are a lot of different cultures out there, and I'll elaborate on that when we talk about community building later on. So it's really important to think about these aspects to, increase process diversity. And then the seventh principle is to disrupt established processes. So to be brave enough to question established processes, to question the patterns and disrupt these. Not destroy, but in a positive way to rethink processes. And finally, the eighth principle is to give meaning to the processes. And that's also part of the first phase of the new process lifecycle. So I'll explain more on that in a few seconds. So these are the currently 8 new process principles as core of the new process approach. But now the question is, how do we bring these principles to life? And there, the simple answer is by making it a process. We are always talking about process all the time. So the answer is just establish a process which then takes all these principles into account. And therefore, my solution is the new process lifecycle, which is more or less a PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act cycle, as a classical process lifecycle. Starting, and that's different to all the life cycles out there, with the first phase where we define the process purpose. So it all starts with the purpose, the why. And I'll give you more insights on that in a few seconds. Then the second phase, based on the process purpose, is to develop the process strategy, a strategy that contributes to the process purpose on the one hand side, as well as to the organizational strategy and its purpose on the other side. And then in a third phase, based on the strategy, it's to design the process. That's more or less the creative part. It's not formalized in a tool. You can use sticky notes just on the wall and map your process there, design your process. That's where we can talk about innovation, benchmarking, and so on. And I will in a second, as soon as I go more and more through the phases. Then the fourth phase is to model the process. That's where we put it into a formal notation, into a tool, in a notation to have a common picture that all the people in your organization will understand, easily understand. That's also where the process owner approves the process design, where we check it for conformity. Is it in compliance with normative and legislative requirements, for example, before we publish the process? And then before we can publish, we have to implement the process. So create all the prerequisites for the execution of the process with regards to technical, organizational, and personal requirements. So there, it's not just sending out an email. It's also think about how do we train, how do we enable the people. And then finally, in the sixth phase of this overall life cycle, we can steer the process execution, hopefully based on indicators, not just based on feelings. Feelings are also very important, but maybe you have some hard indicators there which you can use. And then we go back into the purpose and strategy phase. And in the new process lifecycle, there is at the end, when we steer the process execution, also a smaller integrated lifecycle to improve process execution. So if you're running a global process, which is executed at several locations, then for sure, the local line managers can try to improve the process execution within the given process design. And they have to make sure and that's together with the process owner and the architect, that the cool local ideas, the local innovations find their way into the global process design. So bring in also these good ideas from process execution improvement into the overall process design. That's the process lifecycle in an overview. And now I'd like to go step by step through the phases and give you examples how you can implement this process in your organization in a very human-centric way with examples that really inspire the people for processes to get them excited. So therefore, let's start with the first phase to define process purpose. So give meaning to the process. That's, I would say, the most important, and often people think, oh, that's a little bit spooky to talk about purpose, but I did it several times now and it really works. It definitely makes sense to think about this higher purpose of a process. And this will then create a sense of unity in your process community, to have a common understanding of why do we have this process. And knowing this why, and best way is to put that into a process purpose statement, which you can develop based on the process purpose canvas. I'll put the links into the show notes. But if you have this statement, then this will provide guidance for the design of the process on the one hand side, as well as for the execution. That's super interesting how this really works, and I definitely recommend you to have a closer look onto that. So process purpose will help sustainable process implementation and will also inspire your people and motivate them to live their roles in your process. So this will contribute to pushing your process onto a higher level. So if you would like to learn more on that, I can recommend to go back to episode 4 with Benjamin Rolf, where we talked about how to apply new work ideas to rethink processes. And we deep dived into process purpose in that episode. And there is an additional specific episode, which is episode number 5, on how a process purpose pushes your process to the next level. And that's a solo show where I deep dive into how to do that, how to apply the process purpose canvas and so on. If you would like to go to these episodes, just remember you can just type into your browser newprocesslab.com/episode 5, for example. So episode as a word and then number 5 at the end. And that's the quick link to this episode. So definitely check out these episodes if you haven't heard them before. So after we defined the process purpose, the next phase is to develop the process strategy. And there it's super important to involve the people, to paint the picture of the future of the process. So involving the people is also important for the previous phase to develop the process purpose. But as you proceed throughout the process, then it's even more important to integrate the people into the development of the process strategy. And there I had a super interesting conversation with Lars Linnekogel from TTE Strategy, a company who is specialized in developing human-centric strategies, or strategies in a human-centric way. And there I learned that the strategy is just a plan on how to get from A to B. But to inspire the people for this future state, so B in that case, it's good to have a real picture in mind. So paint a picture of the future of your process there. And there I'm not talking about the process model. This will also in the next phases help to inspire the people. But there I'm talking about things like in Germany we have something like a Wimmelbild. It's a picture in a children's book with a lot of small stories explained or told in this overall picture. And so paint a real picture of the future of your process. Or another way, if you're not talking in a visual way, tell the story of the process. So for example, think about, as a process owner, being interviewed by a newspaper in 5 years about your process. And then you just tell the story of your process there. And then you can use this to inspire your community for the future state of your process. If you would like to learn more on that, then just go to episode 20 of the New Process Podcast. That's where I'm talking with Lars Linnekogel on how to develop a process strategy. And there he provides a lot of good ideas on how to do this in a human-centric way. So after having this picture of the future of the process, we can go into the process design. So to design the process itself. And there, I have to deep dive into one new process principle, and that's to trust the people working in and on the process. So make sure that you design processes that guarantee the people the freedom to make independent decisions. And I would like to give you my favorite example there of a purchasing process. So what I'm used to from the past is that whenever I wanted to purchase material, first I had to put that into the ERP system, and then I needed the approval of my line manager. And after my line manager had approved that, next one was the purchasing guy who had to approve my purchase or my purchase order. And then in the third step, also the controlling had to check if the budget is available and if I'm allowed to buy this material now. So 3 steps to get just simple material board. And there, I think this is absolutely, that's not necessary. If you provide all the information which is needed by the employee to make a decision, like the budget and knowing if it's really operational necessary to make this purchase now, that should be enough for a well-trained employee to make that decision and to take out these unnecessary approval steps and simply to trust the people. So that's so important there, and that's core of the process design here and how to implement that principle in the design to trust the people. Another principle which you can use in process design is to disrupt established processes. So be curious enough to really question the established processes there. Question the established patterns of processes and redesign these processes. One advice there from Nelson Inno, who is my guest in episode 28, so just 2 episodes before, it was to cut your process into pieces. Yeah, print it out and cut the separate steps, all the activities and decisions into pieces to be able to move them around, put them on a table, and then, just take the pieces, move them around, take pieces out, add other pieces, try to innovate there, ask the people, do that in a workshop for sure, bring the people from production to this table to ask them for ideas, or use other innovation methods to bring in ideas from the outside. One which was discussed in the last episode, episode 29, with Benjamin Durant, was how artificial intelligence can be applied to rethink processes. And there, a nice idea is to use, for example, ChatGPT as your co-pilot to rethink a process, ask questions on how could a state-of-the-art receiving goods process look like? How can we improve this process? What are the ideas there? What do we have to take into account and so on? So just use the power of this artificial intelligence as a co-pilot to rethink your process and maybe to disrupt established processes. Another idea there, if you would like to learn more on how to design state-of-the-art processes, is to do benchmarking or to cooperate with academia. And there we had quite early last year an episode with Professor Dr. Daniel Beimborn from University of Bamberg on how to get to the cutting edge of BPM, how to use academia, for example, how to use students to rethink your processes. So if you would like to learn more on that, feel free to go to episode 8 or even to episode 9, which is another episode, another solo episode, where I just provide my 3 pieces of advice to push your BPM ahead. So if you haven't heard these episodes, I think it's a good idea to go back to episode 8 with Daniel or just episode 9 with my advice. And then as soon as we have a process design, we go into modeling to model the process in a formal way. And there it's super important to use a language that the people really understand. And that's, I think, the biggest problem of all the tools out there right now, that the people don't understand the language you are talking. Often it's an expert tool with an expert language like BPMN 2.0, and that's way too complex for non-experts. That's why I would recommend to focus on the information needed by the people to execute the process. Take everything else out. So there I'm often using a very simple swim lane process model with just the roles, their activities and decisions. That's it. No complex operators, no results, no additional information. Just activities, decisions, and some arrows in between to connect these activities. So reduce it as much as possible. And what also is quite good there, to provide a fixed size. So to avoid scrolling, because as soon as you have to scroll to understand the process, often people say, I don't want to go into all the details. That's boring. That's way too complex. Let's leave it. And that's why it's so important to use a language which is understood by the people, to create this common picture in modeling. And then basically it doesn't matter which tool you use, as long as you configure it in a way that it's easy to understand by the employee. And I'm going to recap all the learnings from the tool episodes, from the tool interviews, which I did throughout the last year in a separate episode, which is also coming up in a few weeks. So that's why I don't go into the details of the tool. But if you would like to learn more on how to map processes, we had episode 14 with 14 top expert tips for process modelers. And one of them is mine. The others are from experts from the community. So don't miss episode 14 for process modeler tips. And another super weapon, I would say, is a method which is called story listening. So whenever you are modeling processes, sitting together, asking questions, try to identify the stories and the feelings of the people working in the processes. Try to ask, and how did you feel in that situation when you executed the process the last time? And then try to find the little stories, use them for change and so on. So that's also very important, not just have the hard facts there. Also, think about feelings. Ask the people about feelings. Get the stories. If you'd like to learn more about story listening, then just go back to episode 23, where I talked to Astrid Kirchhoff from Hummingbirds. She's an expert in story listening, and we explore on how to use story listening to rethink processes. Then, in the implementation phase, if we want to implement the process, we definitely have to think about how to enable, how to train the people to execute the improved process design. So it's not just sending out an email, it's thinking about which kind of training formats do we need. And one example I discussed a lot because I love it so much is the pizza game. Now, I discussed it in the episode with Ole Tillmann, as well as in the gamification episode with Jasmine Karatas. The pizza game is just a role play, which is played with sticky notes, pencil, and a lot of paper and scissors. You can play it in groups. You can play it everywhere you want to play it. You just need a minimum of, I think, 8 or 9 people. And as soon as you have more, you can play it also in several groups. You can have a challenge between these groups. And it's made to, learn to think in processes and in roles, to experience how work based on a simple process model can be learned. So what the people get is just a process description. The process model, the detailed descriptions. This is handed over to the people, and then they are able to bake pizza. The customer orders, they bake pizza, and in the end, there are indicators to measure if they were successful or not. And this is how people can experience on their own how simple it is to work according to process models. So as a new employee, for example, if you get processes handed over, then it's super easy. And you can extend that game also to scale innovations and get to know the different process management roles and so on. But this is just an example of a gamified approach to train the people, like with the pizza game for the process of process management. If you would like to learn more on that, then feel free to go to episode 11 with Ole Tillmann from Peak Creative Leadership, where we talk about how to pitch your process. And that's where we also elaborate a lot on the pizza game. And then for gamification, I would recommend to go to episode 16 with Jasmine Caratas, where we talk about gamification ideas to inspire people for processes. And then finally, after implementing the process, we can steer process execution. And there we can steer the execution, for example, by implementing community events. So I don't want to talk about indicators. And so these are the mature methods from the past. But looking into the future, the new process aspect there, I would recommend to think about community events, like bringing the roles, the people executing the roles of your process together. Maybe just the same roles, depending on the size of the process community, or all the roles, so that they can experience the process and get to know each other in person in a live event. You can also do that online, but I would definitely recommend to do it on site, having a beer in the afternoon and a big party at night. If you would like to learn more on that, I can give you some good ideas as well. You can use these community events to share the process purpose. So the one you developed together with the community already in the first phase, but there you can pick it up again, use it for training purpose and so on, provide direction to the people. And you can also talk about process performance at this event. And you can ask the people for their feedback, to get feedback to improve the process or just train the community there as well. So think about how to make your process tangible so that the people can experience your process design and your process. Finally, we reach the last phase of the new process lifecycle, which is to improve process execution. So after implementing the process on a global level, as well as at all the different locations, it's the task of the local line manager to improve process execution within the given process design. So there you can think about how to improve the workshop layout, how to improve the material flow and so on locally. And then bring all the good ideas back to the overall life cycle and bring it into the global design so that also the other locations can profit from the local improvements. And there, one secret weapon for me is to design the cooperation in and on the process to meet people's needs. So think about how do the people cooperate in the process. So picking an example, if we have two roles in a process working together, check where are these roles located. If that's an administrative process, are these roles sitting together in one office or not? Which options do they have to interact within the process execution? So that would be one. Which tools do they use? Especially in a remote setup, for example. And which infrastructure do they have? Do they have the right setup of a computer, maybe a second screen and so on? So really check the needs of the people, what they need to execute the process. And finally, also think about how they communicate. So do they have regular meetings and so on? So really take the people's need into account to improve process execution. And if you have good ideas there, then bring it back into the overall process design. So that would be one of my new process recommendations for the last phase. And that's it. So now it's time to rethink your own BPM process if you already have one. Do you already have new process principles integrated into your process or not? How can you change that? How can you improve that? And then the question is, how do we bring the process itself to life? And there, my answer is by assigning the roles from your process, like process owner, process architect, and so on, to the people. And just do what you tell the people for all the business processes out there. Think about how to enable your roles. Which formats can you use? Which training platforms and so on to train process owners, process architects, to inspire them for your process. And there, I would always recommend to start with defining the process purpose first. So develop process purpose for your process of process management. And if you would like to learn more on a holistic level, how this could look like in reality, I would recommend to go to episode 6, where I'm talking to Michael Bürgle from Lufthansa Technik, how they lead more than 20,000 employees by processes. So Michael provides a lot of good examples on how to do this. And also another interesting episode is episode 18 with Christoph Bünker. He's also working for the Lufthansa Group, for Lufthansa Technik Logistics Services. And he is a real process architect. And he's not only a process architect himself, he is leading a team of a number of process architects. And there you can learn how the life of real process architect looks like. So episode 6 with Michael, or episode 18, just go to newprocesslab.com/episode 18 and listen to the episode with Christoph Bünker, for example. Yeah, and now it's up to you. So be a role model and apply the principles yourself. And the question is, how do we start? And there, as I already said, I would always recommend to start with the process purpose and then use that to build your process community. So first, check all your roles you need to manage your process. Who's the process owner? Who are the architects? Which instances of the process do we have? And what are the process managers, being the ones coordinating process execution at different locations, for example? So bring the process management community together, and also check out who are the ones executing the roles within your process. And then invite them to participate, involve them into the workshops, like starting with process purpose. Or if process purpose is a little bit too spooky, think about setting up a workshop to develop the process strategy, or even process design, whatever fits to your needs, where you are in the life cycle right now, where you have the highest pressure to act. Invite the people to that event. Form something like a core team within your community, which then can be used to, bring all the other people on board. And to set up this core team, I would already be as transparent as possible. So tell the people, tell your whole community what you are going to do, what you are planning to do, and invite them to participate. And there you can provide 3 different options. The first one is they can be in the workshops on site, or if it's necessary to do it online, then online. But I would always prioritize on site first. You can offer them to just comment the results. So if they don't have the chance to be on site or online in the workshops, then what you can do is provide the results to the people so that they have the chance to comment, to bring in their ideas. And finally, as a third option, you can offer to the people just to follow what you're doing. So they still have the chance to say something if they would like to, they can feel informed and so on. So these are the 3 options. And then just build a good representative sample of your process community for the workshops. And there, I'm coming back to the process diversity, process principle from the beginning. It's really important to think about the different cultures. So even if you're located in Germany and you're talking to process community, which is not only in Germany, but also in Switzerland, Austria, then basically the people are talking German language, you think first, but the cultures are often very different, or even at one location, there might be different cultures. So think about the different cultures, make sure that the different aspects are represented, and also the uniqueness of the people is integrated into your process design and process community there. That's something I would always love to stress. So if you would like to learn more about community building, then you can listen to episode 10, where I talked to Mika Leinonen from Ghost Community on how to build a process community. That's super interesting and one of the most referred to episodes, which I recorded in the first year of the New Process podcast. And then finally, act as a process influencer. So use the tools you know from all the influencers out there for your own process. Yeah, to become visible and to create transparency about what you are doing. So really make it transparent what is coming up. Present what you are doing, make your own efforts visible to the people, to the whole organization. Maybe you start your own process podcast. That's something I did with a customer at the beginning of the year, where we started a process podcast where we interview process owners, process architects, people involved into the workshops on a regular basis, and then publish that on corporate media so that the employees, which are not part of the project, can listen to what is going on in the process world in that organization. They can provide feedback and so on. That's always a good way to activate the community as well. Or just host offline, online events like community events and so on. Maybe you can use that to co-create your process purpose and just inspire your process community. So act like a process influencer. If you'd like to learn more about that, then just go back to episode 24, where I'm talking to Andreas Bierwirth from AB Motion on how to become a process influencer. That's super inspiring episode, and don't miss that. And then finally, get it started. So I'll put all the links into the show notes and just get it going.
Let's recap today's new process inspiration.
Wow, what a ride for a solo episode. I did not expect to record more than 40 minutes on the stat of new process, but it's a lot of content and I hope you enjoyed it. I had so many inspiring interviews throughout the last year, and I really love doing this podcast and sharing that with you, with the community out there. So thank you to all my guests, which I was allowed to interview and which told me so much about their methods and tools. And there will be a special recap episode for my search for a human-centric tool, which I'm planning right now. Guys out there, thank you so much for joining my journey, and thank you for all the great feedback you're providing, because I said that already several times. Podcasting is more or less one direction communication, and it's not that often that you get direct feedback, but some of you provided feedback, and that's really awesome, guys, that you are following what I'm doing here, and there are inspiring ideas which you can then implement directly. So thank you very much for listening, and also for providing the feedback. What I'm going to do is, and yeah, I know I told that already several times, I'm going to put all the learnings into the toolbox on newprocesslab.com. And I'll put all the links into the show notes. So if you just go to newprocesslab.com/episode 30, which is this episode, then you'll find all the links of the other referred episodes according to the different phases of the new process lifecycle and the process principles and so on. And then there is one more thing I have to share with you in this special episode today. I started to build an online course which is called the Process Booster. And this is going to be a step-by-step guide to get people excited for your process and push it to the next level. So it's going to be a course designed specifically for people like you who are responsible for processes in the role of a process owner, as a process architect, process manager, process consultant, or however this role is called in your organization. And it will also work for all business processes, all kinds of business processes. Doesn't matter if it's production, administration, and it will also work for the process of process management. So if you are responsible for operating a process management framework, process management system in an organization, then this course of course is for you too. So if you would like to learn more about the course, and want to join the launch team, so be one of the first to know when the course is coming and be part of the first group which is going through the course, then just go to newprocesslab.com/processbooster and join the launch team there. So again, newprocesslab.com/processbooster, or just go to the show notes of this episode and you will find the link there as well. So thank you so much for listening today. Have a great day. Bye-bye and auf Wiedersehen.
You've been listening to the New Process Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for more tools, methods, and best practices to rethink your process and push it to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Okay, before you leave, just as a reminder, I know I just said it, but it's so important for me, and you don't want to miss that too. So to be the first to get all the details on the Process Booster, to join the launch team, just go to newprocesslab.com/processbooster. Type in your name, your email address, and you'll be the first to know as soon as more details are there. So push your process to the next level. Have a great day. Bye-bye.